All right, if you're in K-level, in addition to watching the other Complete the Identity one, you might want to watch these additional ones also. As I suggested in the previous one, it would probably be a good idea if you wrote these down on a clean sheet of paper, then later on go back and see if you can do them yourself. Sometimes just watching me do it isn't quite enough. You kind of have to actually figure out how to do it yourself. All right, so the very first one we have secant of theta times sine of theta plus cosine of theta. Well, as I look at this, I figure, well, the obvious thing to do, maybe it seems, is to distribute. So this times this times this. So this would give me secant of theta times sine of theta plus secant of theta times cosine of theta. Secant is 1 over cosine, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I get 1 over cosine of theta times sine of theta plus 1 over cosine of theta times cosine of theta. I'm going to kind of go horizontal here now since I was running out of room. Sine over cosine comes out to be tangent of theta, because sine over cosine is tangent. Cosine over cosine, they just cancel, so you get plus 1. So that is what that simplifies to be. All right, nextly we have 1 plus 2 sine of theta cosine theta over sine theta plus cosine theta quantity squared. In the numerator, there's not much I can do, but however, in the denominator, I can go ahead and multiply that out. So I'm going to just copy the numerator down, so 1 plus 2 sine of theta cosine of theta. But in the denominator, I'm going to go ahead and square this. Remember, when you're squaring something, you can go sine of theta plus cosine theta times sine of theta plus cosine theta, which is like when you'd FOIL it. Like, let's just off to the side here. Let me just go ahead and... You cannot just go sine squared plus cosine squared. That's a very common error, but don't do it. Because you have to... remember, like when you learned this in Algebra 1, you learned you had to FOIL it, right? So first term would be sine squared of theta. Outer term would be sine theta cosine theta. Inner term would be sine theta cosine theta. So you're going to get 2 sine of theta cosine thetas. And then cosine squared plus times cosine squared gives you cosine squared of theta. Cosine theta times cosine theta gives you cosine squared of theta. I think I said that wrong before. All right, so now notice sine squared plus cosine squared. What do those add up to be? Well, sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta is my primary Pythagorean identity, and it's equal to 1. So I'm going to just repeat my numerator up here. So I have 1 plus 2 sine of theta cosine theta. And now in my denominator, sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta is 1. And then I have plus 2 sine of theta cosine of theta. And voila, they're exactly the same. So my answer to this problem is 1. All right, next I have sine of theta over cosine of theta plus cosine of theta over sine theta. You could just say maybe, oh, what if the answer is just tangent of theta plus cotangent of theta? Because that's also true. Probably that's not going to be the answer. They're going to want you to get a common denominator and see if you can add these together. So the least common denominator is going to be when you multiply these two together. So I'm going to call it cosine of theta sine theta. Then to get cosine theta to be cosine theta sine theta, you need to multiply numerator and denominator by sine of theta. Sine of theta times sine of theta gives you sine squared of theta. And then to get sine of theta to be cosine theta sine theta, you need to multiply numerator and denominator by cosine of theta. So cosine of theta times cosine of theta gives you cosine squared of theta. And sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta is 1. So 1 over cosine of theta sine theta. They're going to want you to not leave it as a fraction if you can possibly, simplify it further. So 1 over cosine of theta is secant of theta, and 1 over sine of theta is cosecant of theta, and that will be your final answer. secant of theta times cosecant of theta.